and welcome to the Daily Scripture Podcast. My name is Jerome Lavelle, and I hope that you are having a marvelous day today. Today we will be looking at Mark chapter 9, verses 30 through 37. Jesus and his disciples left from there and began a journey through Galilee, but he did not wish anyone to know about it. He was teaching his disciples and telling them, "The Son of Man is to be handed over to men, and they will kill him, and 3 days after his death, the Son of Man will rise." But they did not understand the saying, and they were afraid to question him. They came to Capernaum, and once inside the house, he began to ask them, "What were you arguing about on the way?" But they remained silent, for they had been discussing among themselves on the way who was the greatest. Then he sat down, called the 12, and said to them, "If anyone wishes to be first, he shall be the last of all, and the servant of all." Taking a child, he placed it in their midst, and put his arms around it. He said to them, "Whoever receives one child such as this in my name receives me. And whoever receives me receives not me, but the one who sent me." Today, in the Gospel of Mark, chapter 9, verses 30 through 37, we hear Jesus preparing his disciples. The passage tells us that Jesus had gone away with his disciples only, not telling anyone else, because he didn't want them to know where he was going. My assumption being that he wanted some private time with them. And what did he have to tell them? The scripture says he was teaching his disciples and telling them, "The Son of Man is to be handed over to men, and they will kill him, and 3 days after his death, the Son of Man will rise." And so the purpose of the private meeting was to prepare them for what he would face when they came into Jerusalem during Passover. So to me, his mission was to educate and prepare them so that they would not be afraid, and to know that this was all part of God's great design. However, and I am sure much to Jesus' chagrin, the scripture says, "But they did not understand what he was saying, and they were afraid to question him." To which I can't help but comment, "Oh, the frailty of human perception." Mark's passage then leaves that comment, "They did not understand and were afraid to ask him," and then describes details of the travel conversation of the disciples. The scripture says that they had been arguing among themselves on the way who was the greatest. In picturing this scene, I find this to be so hilarious. Going with the assumption that men are men and have always been men, I can almost hear and see the disciples as they walk along the dusty routes between villages and towns, arguing among themselves who is the greatest. And I am picturing the many light and casual conversations that I have been in amongst men, talking about the best lawn mowing methods, or who is the best baseball pitcher of all time, or which brand of power tools is most reliable, or any number of spirited but fun conversations that men often have when we gather. And here were the disciples walking along, talking about who was the greatest. Mark's passage tells us that Jesus must have been listening to this back and forth among his men. It says that once they arrive at their destination, Jesus said to them, "If anyone wishes to be first, he shall be last of all and the servant of all." And then, taking a child, he placed it in their midst, putting his arms around it. He said to them, "Whoever receives one child such as this in my name receives me, and whoever receives me receives not me, but the one who sent me." What a beautiful instruction Jesus gives his men and us here in this passage. He takes their conversation about who is the greatest and redirects it from who's the greatest to who is the least. who is the servant of others, who cares for those innocent and marginalized in our society. He says to the men, that person is the greatest and will be rewarded by the one who sends me, who sends Jesus. I absolutely love this redirection on the part of Jesus. As I think about this passage from the Gospel of Mark and Jesus' redirection, what I see is Jesus saying that it's okay to be the greatest. But the question is, greatest at what? It seems obvious to me that the men's conversation was probably about the greatest amongst them in terms of strength or intelligence or agility or family connections or business acumen or personal attractiveness or any number of other things. But what Jesus says is, yes, be the greatest, but be the greatest at things that matter in the heavenly realm. For as we know from Matthew 6, Jesus says, do not store up treasures on earth, but rather store up treasures for yourself in heaven. For where your treasure is, there too will be your heart. So Jesus is saying to his disciples, and he's saying to us today, to be great at those things, those heavenly things, those things that last, those things that lift people up. Things like kindness, forgiveness, gentleness, understanding, temperance, humility, and love, and the like. To me, today, I hear Jesus saying, be great at those things. Thank you for joining the Daily Scripture Podcast. My name is Jerome Lavelle, and remember, our word of the day is be great. Yes, be great at those things. Until next time, be well and be blessed.